Hello, ladies. Welcome to day 17 of the 28-day challenge of the Fearless Woman of Faith speaker. It's all about helping you to become the kind of speaker that God wants you to be fearless in your message, to be fearless in your obedience to Him, to be fearlessly devoted to walking out your calling. And today I have a flannel on. It's interesting because I woke up this morning and I felt like it's Flannel Friday. I don't normally do this. It's so funny, but I just ran with it. I'm like, I'm gonna dress in my flannel today and be Flannel Friday. So if you have flannel, I'd love it if you post a picture of yourself in a flannel. You know, I live in Alberta, which is kind of the redneck of Canada. It's the ranch country, oil country, and really great, hardworking people, lovers of Jesus mostly. And I know my guest today is in the Texas of the United States, similar to our Alberta. So she can appreciate what I'm talking about. But I know that you're in for a treat today with my guest, who is going to share with you all about rediscovering joy. Now, let's get right into it. Mindee Woodward is an on-fire motivator, intent on helping women see their value and worth through their specific God-given identity as women. She has authored 2 books, travels and speaks to MOPS and women's groups, and she is the host of the podcast Unconfineable, Mommas. She helps women in all walks of life recognize their value as powerful women in the kingdom. She equips and trains women to recognize the mother heart of God within themselves so that they can bring heaven to earth in ways only women can do. Her heart is to equip women to change the world as themselves. Let me, without further ado, welcome Mindee. Oh no, are you frozen? Mindee, can you?
I am so sorry. I don't know what's going on.
I can see you. I can hear you if you want to keep talking.
I am so sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me? Like,
Yes.
I'm frozen. I don't hear anything. I'm so sorry.
Okay. I hear you. I
can't hear anything, and I don't know what's going on.
All right.
I'm trying.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Jump off. I'm going to send you a message.
One of my other speakers will work.
She's got, so let me just tell you a bit about Mindee. Mindee is just putting on her, try and work with her audio here.
I do not know.
I'm
so sorry. I don't know what happened. I'm like frozen. I'm not really sure why I'm frozen.
Can you jump off and get back in, Mindee?
Okay, I can do that.
All right, so she'll
okay. Let me read it.
So while we're waiting for our guest, I would love it if you would put in the comments where you're tuning in from and what are some of the things that God has been speaking to you over these last number of days. If you've been tuning in at all, maybe you've only watched one, maybe you've watched all 17, or 16. I would love it. What are some of the things that you want to share that God is doing in you? Maybe you're feeling empowered, you're feeling inspired. Okay, here's Mindee, hopefully. Hi, Mindee.
Hi.
Yes, can you hear me?
I'm here, but I can't hear anything. I don't know what the problem is. I'm so sorry. Oh, wait, I hear something. We're good.
Can you hear me?
I can hear now. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Lord.
Right. That's all right. So glad you're here. Well, listen, Mindee, I am super excited because you and I met a couple of years ago now. It's been a number of years. We've never actually met in person, but we got to know each other through another organization that we were both involved with on a leadership level. Mm-hmm. And I just really felt connected to you right away in terms of your heart and your vision and your love for freedom and, the initiatives that you've put yourself out there. So I would love it if you would share what you're doing right now, even with the podcast. How did you come to do what you're doing?
I just like being a Christian. I think we've made it so incredibly hard. Like we forget a lot of the practicality and logistics of Christianity. And so I just really want to help share like that part of what it looks like to actually walk in a Christian lifestyle. Because like we've really spiritualized things, which I'm super excited about. And like there was a whole time in my life where I wasn't like super spiritual at all. Like I've always been a believer and I've always like really run after God, but I didn't know about Holy Spirit. I didn't know about all the miracles and signs and wonders that can come through my hands. Like I didn't know any of that stuff. So when I say spiritual, I'm like, maybe supernatural might be a better word for it. But you can't see the supernatural if you don't do the logical either. You know what I mean? Like,
Wow.
for example, I mean, how many times people will say, I'm praying for this promotion at work, but they're a terrible employee. Like, it's like you kind of have to have the practical before you can have the supernatural. Because yes, you'll have a lot of favor, and there are definitely things that have happened in my life that God really provided a way that was not necessarily fair. But when you have to do the practical things as well with Christianity. And I think sometimes we forget to teach those things. And so that's really my heart of teaching like really practical things that can really launch you into the supernatural, because it's very foundational. So when you know, like, this is how I engage the supernatural with these very logical things, then you really can go so much further. So I wanted, yes, to start the podcast for mamas, but it's so much more than just how to be a really good mom, because I'm not probably the most qualified person to do parenting because I'm in the middle of it and I fail every day. But what I do know is that, when I know who I am and I know my authority, and I'm, as a matriarch of my family, like God, you make room for God to do what I can't do, and there's a lot of things that are like, we're trying so hard to get everything right as moms, but it's like, but if you make room for the supernatural to come in, and that looks really logical, as like talk to the atmosphere and be like, this belongs to Jesus. Like, you can't be here, infirmary. You can't be here. This is my territory. How do you walk your territory and claim it as yours? And how do you, on the timeline of your life, like go into the timeline and be like, hey, I'm about to have this really hard conversation with someone, and I want it to be good for both them and for me. And so I invite the Prince of Peace into this time, and I say that this belongs to Jesus. This whole part belongs to Jesus. And the cool thing about spiritual warfare is that in its simplest form, it's just turning the light on. So it's knowing what is missing in the situation and breathing that life into it, and being intentional about it, instead of warring against all the negativity. You just turn the light on, like you purposefully make it where like the light's going to shine. So I want to take the time to help practically and logically like set the stage for the supernatural to take flight in our women, because I just think that like there's so many women that have no idea the amount of power and authority that have been granted us because we are matriarchs. Whether you're an actual mother or not, that's the other cool thing too, is like all these other women that aren't married, don't have children. They're like, well, I've been nullified almost. And you're like, no, you're still a matriarch. You just have to recognize that there are things in you that, maybe other people don't have, or that God hasn't, that we're learning through mothering, but you have in you, and you're a matriarch, a spiritual matriarch. And there's just so much to that God can do through us as women that he can't do through men. I mean, not to be weird. I mean, there are a lot of things men can do that we can't do on purpose and intentionally, but we're not teaching our women how to do that as well. And so, that's what we like. That's my heart, is to really build that foundation for women to be queens and to be mothers.
Wow.
In the kingdom.
Wow. I love that. So a few things that you said was one, I love that where you talked about you have to be practical if you want to see the supernatural. I think that's a powerful message right there, because we often see that people want the supernatural, but they don't attend to the practical, and they wonder why they're not seeing the supernatural. And then the other thing that you said is the supernatural coming into your everyday life as you walk out the calling of God, as a mother, as a matriarch, an influencer, as a woman who brings the presence of God. Wow. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? How you help women recognize this matriarch in them?
Well, okay, so there's a lot of different things. So a mentor of mine introduced me to so he's a man. So it was orphan son, king father, is what he, was talking. But we can switch it into, orphan daughter, queen mother. And there's this timeline of when you don't recognize that you have an inheritance with God. You don't know who you are. You just in this orphan mindset of, a victim, everything's against me, things like that. And when you become a daughter, then you recognize, like, I have this inheritance and I'm dearly loved. My behavior doesn't determine my standing with God. You become a daughter, and that's such an important thing. Like, there are just some things in life that you're just going to have to recognize that you're a daughter. Like, and that's so important. But a lot of people stay there when we were called to be queens. Like, we are called to the masses to not just get people saved, but to actually transform cultures. And you can only do that by being a queen. And it's not going in there. Like, when I say you take your pastoral gifting into the marketplace, it's not going to be a preacher in the marketplace. It's going to actually, like, walk people through processes, help them, grow and things like that. But we've got to have a whole lot more pastoral people in the marketplace, and government and education and media, like all of it. And that's really great. And you have an authority, and nobody trumps your authority in the spiritual realm that doesn't have Christ with them. And if you walk into someone that has Christ in them too, then you've just doubled your authority, right? So you have the greater spiritual authority in you. So we need to teach people how to be queens, right? But then, we don't want to, if I die and I am a queen and I make a huge influence, my influence dies with me. So I need to come along behind and help other people develop their queenship, help develop them and grow them as mothers, as matriarchs. And then, help them become matriarchs to other people, like help them mother other people as well. And that's how we can change a culture, instead of just, being sad that the world is crumbling around us. I'm like, well, then we need to do something about that. Like, what's the solution? If you're willing to ask the questions, then you actually are the solution carrier, because there's something in you that made you ask that question, and Holy Spirit can answer it and help you bring it forward. But you got to be able to do that. Like, you have to ask the question and be willing to do so.
That is so good. That's so good. Yes, if there's something that's burdening you, that's upsetting you, that you're looking for, often that's an indication that God is pulling you into that area. Can you give an example of something in your life that happened?
So I'm a nurse by trade, actually, and I worked in an emergency room for many years, and I actually still do, and working later today, actually. But it's different things. But, like, a lot of times in that area, there's so much burnout, and there's so much just negativity. I mean, just what you see and what you do and it wears on you. And, like, I remember one particular time that there was this girl that I actually hated working with. I didn't like her. She didn't like me. I didn't know why she didn't like me, but I definitely didn't like her. She was really lazy, blah, blah, blah. And I was griping about her to God one day. And God's like, maybe you should practice what you preach. And, like, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, speak identity into her. And I'm like, well, right now I don't know anything that I like about her. You're going to have to show me, which he didn't. But immediately, I guess I should say, he didn't immediately, but, like, the next, like, I'm talking like 2-3 months, every time I worked, we were together, which, is intentional. But it came from starting something small of, she was getting married, and she tried on a black wedding dress, which she wasn't going to get, but it did look gorgeous. And so I posted it. And so I commented on it. I was like, how gorgeous it was. She's like, I'd never wear it. And I was like, well, even if you'd never wear it, you put it on, it looks amazing. Just looking for ways to start the process, because then I started seeing things I could respect, seeing things I could put into, speak into and validate her and things like that. And it wasn't very long before I walked into the break room and I heard 2 girls, like, gossiping behind her back about how she's such a different person now, and how maybe it's because, she's getting married, or maybe it's because she, lost a lot of weight, or, all this stuff. And I just turned around, like, to God, and I was like, I know that was you. I know that was you, because we created the opportunity for God to work. And I never quoted a scripture to her. I never whatever, but I validated her and I spoke into her identity, and it mattered so much that it actually changed the way that other people saw her too.
Wow.
Which was such a good thing. Like that's how you can change and like speak into the darkness. Like that's how you can move forward. And when we talk about doing spiritual warfare on people, it's always for their benefit. Like it can't be manipulation, because they get the good end of the stick. They get to recognize where their value is. They get to recognize that they don't have to overcompensate. They get to see these things, and it changes the whole atmosphere around us. I mean, it wasn't very long later, maybe a year later, she asked me to coffee, which was super weird because I didn't even think she liked me, but it was so cool because you're like, okay, God, I really know that's you now, because before it was such a huge deal, and so just speaking that life into people, like that's I took authority over the atmosphere, but it wasn't going to make any difference until we could change her life. Right. And so by changing her life, like even to this day, like she was a Christian, but I didn't even know it, but now I could tell it. Right. And so it's just little things like that, like speaking into them and sowing into them.
Wow, that's so powerful. And yeah, the power of our words. We know that scriptures tell us that, but to be able to speak, I love that. It's the spiritual warfare, to speak into the atmosphere, the truth, and to call forth her identity of who she is in God. I love that analogy. And I'm assuming that's also what you mean when you're mothering,
Yes. Yeah, because we have been given so much authority, our word as Christians, that we have words. And like, if we will take a little bit of intentionality to find something that we can respect in people and speak that life into them, or if you can't find anything, there's always the instead of promise of Isaiah 61. Jesus came to give us beauty instead of ashes. So if you only see ashes, speak the opposite and watch it come forth, right? And so, because if we will take the time to be intentional, especially to the people who are the hardest to get along with, like everybody else has already given up on them, and you even want to give up on them. But if you take the time to be like, okay, God, like this is our next person, like you could literally change their lives because they were already trying to push people away, or that people have already written them off. But only like Christians can come alongside and say, there's still promise here. They're not dead yet. So there's still promise here, to speak life into them. And, it's not always cupcakes and rainbows, but the cool thing because they don't always respond awesomely, but the cool thing is that, even if they don't respond that way, it doesn't negate what you've put out into the atmosphere over them. So when you're speaking life and all that, those words won't come back void, and so even if they don't respond well to you, which most people, while you're trying to do all of this, won't respond like, oh, you're so right. They'll bite back, but you aren't looking for validation. They are. You aren't desperate for their validation, but they are desperate for yours. And so by speaking it out, like it doesn't come back void. It's always good.
That is so good. I love that. I love that instead of. That's a writer downer. That is a strategy right there in and of itself. What a gold nugget when we don't know what to speak over someone. Just look at that and do what the opposite is, what it is that God wants to give them instead of what you see. So Mindee, let's talk a little bit about the whole aspect, because I know at one point you ran for politics, right? Or did I? Or you were going to?
It's still in the works. Actually, it's such a different game. But yeah, it eventually I will be. I was going to, and then like the whole aspect of the games, at least in the U.S., really changed, and I felt it was more. I needed to raise my kids. Like at least get them more raised, because I like what used to only be, 3 months out of every 2 years that you would go meet was like a whole year of stuff. And so it's just kind of one of those things where I'm like, okay, I got to raise kids first.
Yeah.
It's a different game now. So
it is.
But I have a real heart for politics.
Yeah.
I do. Well, government. I don't like politics, but I do love government.
Yeah. And is that something that was recently born in you, or is that something you just identified over the years?
I have a really weird experience with that. Like, I honestly didn't pay a whole lot of attention. Like, I always voted and, all of that stuff. But like, I was at a Women on the Front Lines convention a couple of years ago. I think it was 2017 or whatever. And for whatever reason, there were just different people in Arizona that were politicians that came in to see what was going on, and like were totally blown away by what we were doing, and they were really encouraging. And I was just really impressed that they would come. Like, because I mean, thankfully it was in Phoenix, so like there was a lot of the governmental people there that could just be like, what's going on over here? Let's go see, and they were able to speak into it. And I just thought how cool that was, that they would do that. And then I didn't know that on the last night I'm walking out of the church and I literally heard the voice of God say, if I sent you into the government mountain, what would you say? And I turned around to see who he was looking at, because I'm like, surely not me. Like, what? And I was like, there was nobody behind me. Like, I thought I was just eavesdropping. And I told her, I said, well, of course the answer is yes, because this is going to be a wild ride. But are you sure you're talking to me? And then that was it for like 18 months. I didn't hear anything, but little things were here and there. Like, I want you to go visit the capital of the US. I want you to do this. I want you to do this. And then I started getting involved with some other, it's called Patriot Academy. And that like teaching us how to go back to the biblical foundations that we were founded on and how to actually move in that. And so I began teaching that and trying to help people recognize that, like, if we don't have Christians involved in government, not politics, politics is dirty, but government is God's idea, right? Yeah. But if we don't get them in there, then we won't have anything but corruption. Because if your eyes aren't fixed on God, you will be corruptible. Like, you can try for a really long time, but somebody's going to find something that's going to get under your skin, right? So if we don't have integrity in all aspects of society, then we will all fall. And so, I mean, it doesn't even remember, that's the other cool thing is, like, when you talk about government, every country has a government of some kind. And so it's like, we were not made to be in the church. Only a few people were supposed to be behind a pulpit and be a minister there. Like, there's a fivefold ministry, but it's for the equipping of the saints of the work of the ministry. That's what that's for. Like, the majority of people will be out in the world. And that's where, like, integrity and character and all of that matter, because that's where the changes are going to happen. Church is amazing and I love it. And I do have a huge heart for reformation in our churches, but it's so much more than just coming in together. It should be like, you come and you get equipped and you get filled with the Holy Spirit and all that. And then you go out in the world and you actually do all the things that you were learning and growing through. And I think, like, if we could just get that, like, around people, is like, we do belong out in the world. So yeah, sometimes you are to raise your family and you're raising little warriors, but we are supposed to be an effective difference maker in every aspect of our lives. And sometimes that's at the grocery store. Like, we have some of the craziest encounters at the grocery store. My kids are really awesome at grabbing encounters with people as well. And like, I watch people change just by conversing with my kids. That's just something that, like, right now, like, that's where we're at. But like, we have to make a difference wherever we're at. And it's not going to come from our words necessarily, our preaching. It's going to come from the actions that we take and the choosing to be really kind to the people who are really mean and ugly and bullies. Yeah. But it's so cool because God is so fun with his favor. Like, I think every time somebody's ever said, oh, well, you two won't get along, or blah, blah, anything, like, people are like, oh, you two would just never get along, or watch out for her, she'll stab you in the back, things like that. Those are my favorite people in the whole world, because I'm like, challenge accepted. Where's their hurt that needs to be spoken into? Like, what is it about them that makes it tick? And I will validate them. If none of y'all will, I will,
Wow. And Mindee, is that what you mean when you talk about, like, learning how joy is a weapon?
Absolutely. So I believe that all the spiritual gifts, like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, the fruit of the Spirit, spiritual gifts too, characteristics of Jesus, all of that, those are actually our weapons of warfare, which are not carnal in nature. And so, like, it's not about taking people out. It's about lifting them up. And it's always about what is missing in their lives. And needs to be displaced. So you can't get rid of negatives by a negative, and you can't, like, our brains don't understand. They don't actually like understand negatives. Like, so you have to impart positive stuff. So not negative positivity. I think sometimes with joy, people are like happy go lucky, like you have to kind of force it or be the false positivity, which is just as destructive. But with joy as a weapon, like, so what is it in their lives that joy is being happy, and it's being cheerful, but it's also that calm peace, right? And it's also that, that steady hand, or that steady, rock in the midst of the storm. Like, all of those are the different ways that the Hebrew and the Greek describe joy. And so it's figuring out what's missing and how can I be that missing piece and turn the light on. You're displacing the darkness. So when you talk about like warfare with joy and you're displacing the darkness, it might be willing to be kind, or it might be willing to be joyful when everybody else around you isn't joyful, and being helpful. Or so like in the ER with me, like everybody's burned out and everybody's tired and everybody's stressed and all that, and it's coming beside them and being like, hey, what can I do to help? And I've also found that that's also a terrible question sometimes. It's like, for me, I might ask myself, what can I do to help? But when you go up to somebody, you suggest, hey, I know you need this, this, and this. Are you okay if I do this? And a lot of times they'll say yes, because if people are overwhelmed, they don't know where to start. They don't know where to explain to you where to start, So it's like, I see you need an IV in room 2 and 3. Can I do your IVs in 2 and 3? Oh, yes, and I need labs. That kind of stuff. Like, they'll add to it even. And that's not a big deal at all. But it brings them joy.
That's
like
so
not happy, celebrating, whatever, but it is that peace joy that something just got taken care of, that I don't have to worry about it anymore. Wow. Or with our kids, like when they're arguing and complaining and having, it's like, okay, what's the joy set before you? Because that's Jesus, when he, like, what's the joy set before you? Because for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that joy actually was the happy, celebrating joy that like you just won the Super Bowl, right? Like that, it was so crazy to me. It blew my mind that was the joy that described the joy set before him. And so it's like going back in and with your kids and being like, okay, this is really hard. It is going to take a lot of discipline, but what's it going to look like when you finish? And then try to help them feel those feelings so that when they can get to the end, now I can celebrate. And it's trying to figure out how to get rid of the negative. So it goes back to the instead of, right? Yeah. You're wanting to, what's the instead of in this situation of the joy set before you, instead of saying, I'm going to have to do this. Like, disciplines are not fun.
Yes.
But somewhere along the way, they become habit and they become actually fun. But you have to get up to that point first,
Yeah,
so
I love that. You're reframing.
The joy set before you will change everything,
Yeah, I can see that. It's just like taking that look in that long view, just like Jesus did. He endured the cross, he endured the suffering, all the things, because he had his eye on why he was doing this, and what was on the other side of that pain was the freedom that we would enjoy, the joy that would come into relationship with him. And that is a beautiful perspective to present to your kids and to us, to be able to, when we have difficult circumstances, say, okay, what is the joy on the other side of this?
Man, like probably the best example of it is child rearing in general. Like, it's so hard, and you never know. Like, I have 3 girls, and if they would just all be the same, it would be easier, but it is not, and they're all different ages, but they all have way different personalities and everything. And sometimes it is difficult to be the bad guy all the time. Like, you feel like the bad guy. I'm doing this. I'm asking you to do this. I'm trying to teach you this. But the joy set before you is like some wholesome kids. Like, there have been several times with my teenager, I'll be like, no, ma'am, it is not going to be like that. You're going to be the one that shows people how to cook and clean. I'm not sending you into the world without knowing how to cook and clean, because there's going to be people in your path that are not going to know, and I want you to be the one to teach them.
Wow. So. Wow. Hey, listen, just as we wrap up here, Mindee, is there anything that you want to share in terms of a scriptural or in terms of a woman in the scriptures that you want to bring out today?
You know, one of the crazy things that God really highlighted to me was Philip had 4 daughters and they prophesied. It's in Acts 21:9. So sorry. It's in Acts 21:9. And it says, you know, Philip, which was one of the original 7 deacons, had 4 daughters who prophesied. And that's so important that we recognize that they got mentioned in the Bible. Because what does that mean? Is that they were so well, you know, versed in prophecy or whatever, they were mentioned. And like prophetic words are amazing for, you know, destiny and all, but it's also wisdom and it's discernment and it's knowledge and all of that. It's so much more than that. And the fact that he had 4 daughters, like the legacy that he had, actually, people, the Bible scholars attribute Philip being one of the 72 men that Jesus sent out. And they came back and they're like, man, we did it too. And all of that. And so what a legacy for him to pass down to his daughters, enough so that they were mentioned, that they were prophets. See, they said Philip's an evangelist, but his daughters were prophets. And I just think that that's a huge deal because we have been given so much as women to be able to like fearlessly go forward and prophesy. We can be prophetic. We can be evangelistic, you know, all of those teachers, you know, all of that, because what we've been given, the legacy that we hold, is worthy of mentioning. Because even if you are in the middle of child rearing, even if you are in the middle of all the hard things in life, like there were different parts I look back down, I'm like, man, I was only in survival mode. And that's okay. Don't stay there, you know, get out of survival mode. But, you know, we are able to prophesy over people, you know, and God speaks that into us as women, just like he did Deborah. It wasn't that Deborah was his last resort because no men would step up. It's that, no, he chose her to be the judge and the prophet. And so like, it's the same thing with like Philip's daughters. I'm kind of sad that they weren't named. However, just the fact that they were written in means that they were really significant. We have the ability to be significant as well.
That is so beautiful. I love that, Mindee, because of the fact that in that culture, to mention women was not common, and it wasn't a common practice. And so the Lord just wanted us to know that you are significant women, that there is a place, there's a call, and to fearlessly go forward. I love that. And I just want to say too, what you just talked about there with the prophetic, that everything we talked about today in terms of the instead of, for the joy set before, those are all prophetic calling, prophetic, you know, forthtelling, prophetic speaking into the lives of others. The life that God has called them to be. So thank you so much for all that you do. And thank you for being here with us today.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. I just love you, Lisa. Like there's so much that like, I was like, man, you might forget more than I will ever know, but I will join arms with you and we will run together and just make, like you said, make women fearless. That's so important.
Thank you so much. Now, is there a place where people can go to contact you? I was looking for, did you send me a link? I'm sorry if you did.
Well, okay. So the website is being completely redone just to go with, I'm really want to run with really going with women. So it's MindeeWoodward.com, but there's nothing there right now. So you just have to have that. And then here in a couple of weeks, my podcast will be everywhere, but it will be Unconfineable Mommas. In the meantime, you can find me on Facebook, just Mindee Woodward. And we can be friends and you'll see everything and, you know, we'll go from there. But like, I'm totally revamping everything. Like God's just like, you know, he's really niched it down to, we really need to get women on board with the power and the authority that God's granted them so that they can really be changers. Because there are things in us as women that men do not have, that we're missing a total like side of God Like just a total, like the view that we bear the image of God, and there's something that in that image that only women carry. And if we can bring people with us, like it's just going to make it just so much better. So unfortunately everything's under construction, but find me on Facebook, because you'll see me talking all the time. And I really like to connect. You'll get a good look at my kids and the crazy life that we lead.
And I love that. I love that about you. You've always been just raw, just real life. And here's what it is. I love that about you, just moving forward in real life. So I love you, Mindee. I know we're going to continue to do things together. And I'm so glad that you're on this mission too, as well, to see the fullness of God's image displayed on the earth when men and women walk together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, bless you. So make sure you connect with.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome. Make sure you connect with Mindee on Facebook. Go to Mindee Woodward and connect with her. She is someone you definitely want to follow. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. I look forward to connecting with you tomorrow. And tomorrow I have a special gift to give you. So you want to tune in, if not live, then definitely the replay. And have a beautiful day. Remember, be fearless.